most popular of the prophets. I would say Daniel, Jonah would be up there. And I mean popular in the sense of well known. Like most people know the full story of Jonah. That's why he's probably the most popular. One, it's a really short book. It's 4 chapters, and it really tells only one story. So it's easy to know the book of Jonah. And then Daniel has several, distinct stories within it. You've got the first part here in chapter 1 of them refusing the king's meat. You've got the lion's den. You've got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego take the scene for 1 chapter about the fiery furnace. Then there's visions that are interpretations of dreams from Daniel on the behalf of these kings. And then some toward the end of the book, prophecy. So anyway, there's more stories in Daniel than in Jonah, but I think Daniel and Jonah are probably the top 2 well-known prophets, and I look forward to getting into it today. We're in chapters 1 through 3 of Daniel, and just to get you acquainted with where we are, what's going on, it's actually the same sort of time frame as Ezekiel. The end of Jeremiah, all of Ezekiel, and then Daniel all take place during the first wave of Babylonian captivity. So the Babylonians come and they take a lot, but not all, of the people. And Daniel was among that group that went first. And so Daniel, along with his 3 friends, which we generally call by their Babylonian names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those 4 guys were just, they had a different trajectory than most of the people who were taken. So they had some things going for them or not going for them, depending on how you look at it. They were young, able-bodied, but they were very, very intelligent, and that was a premium on the agenda of the Babylonians. They wanted to conquer, but they wanted to siphon off any resources from their captors that they could, and for them, knowledge was king, which is interesting. We've seen different waves of this go through our world. Actually, right now, the prevalent mindset is not particularly focused on knowledge. We're in postmodernism, where postmodernism is basically the idea of subjective truth. So what's true for you is your truth. What's true for me is my truth. If you think my car is pink and I think my car is blue, it's probably true for both of us. Just my truth is my truth, yours is yours. So it's that weird. So knowledge is not premium right now, but you think of Gnosticism, which was all about knowledge, and that was a bit going on in the New Testament time, where if you knew a lot of stuff, you were basically God. And it very much like the original Babel, right? The forefather or the genesis of Babylon itself, Babel was, hey, we can do whatever we want. Let's just build a tower and we'll knock on God's door. And we'll pay him a little visit. We'll just have a little chat and have coffee with God or something. And it was all about man's pride, man's ability, it's man's strength, man's knowledge, and that started at the tower, and that has continued into Babylon. And so Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taken, and they don't have the same life that everyone else has, that most people had who were taken. So even Ezekiel wasn't in that crew. And remember, Ezekiel in his prophecy was saying, hey, even if, was that Jeremiah? I can't remember which of the 2 guys. Even if Daniel, Job, and I always forget the third one, were able to minister, that it's talking about the hardness of their hearts, that the people wouldn't listen. So the idea is everybody knew Daniel was top notch, a brainiac. In fact, chapter 1 of Daniel is written in Hebrew. Chapters 2 through 7 are written in Aramaic, the originals. And then the rest of the book is back in Hebrew. So he's just like freely transitioning from different languages and his name is known by the king. He's that smart. Okay, so just trying to lay the groundwork here. I always think of Daniel in terms of bravery, courage, integrity, and those are all definitely very, very powerful attributes of Daniel. But what most people knew him for was not those things, but it was his smarts. And in fact, I think the king underestimated Daniel's resolve, obviously. And Daniel was godly before he was gifted, but most people thought he was gifted and that was it. So he was the full package deal. An incredible person. He was gifted, but he was also godly. And it caused a lot of havoc in his life, but he also was used by God. So let's read this. Chapters 1 through 3 today. Let's begin. Chapter 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim king of Judah came Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. By the way, I don't know if you ever have a problem with this. So Daniel's new name, which is not used very much, Belteshazzar, and I see on our daily walk here we've got different answer keys to the definitions of these names. But so Belteshazzar means protected by Bel, which is Baal. So he gets this new name that goes from Daniel, which means God is my judge, to Belteshazzar, I'm protected by Baal. Just a slap in the face to be given such a name and not called by your godly and given name. But anyway, Belteshazzar, the reason I stopped was so Nebuchadnezzar's son, who becomes the next king after Nebuchadnezzar dies, his name is Belshazzar, with no T-E in the middle of it. So we've got Belteshazzar, which is Daniel, and Belshazzar, which is Nebuchadnezzar's son. Just to keep them distinct in your minds, if you're reading these names, don't get them mixed up. So, verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat, and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. That's really the biggest tool in his tool belt, is his ability to interpret visions and dreams, which he makes very clear in the coming chapters. Look, I mean, it's not, understanding visions and dreams is not a thing of intellect. This is something that God can do, and God has chosen to use Daniel to do that. And so, anyway, verse 18. Reminds me of Joseph, right? Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. You see what we just read? That the king communed with them. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, not just any king, like he at this moment is a king of kings. Don't misunderstand me. That's a biblical way of saying that, and it's not only a title, capital K, King of Kings. That's Jesus. But to call someone in that time frame a King of Kings meant that he was a king who conquered other kings, and so he literally had kings in prison that he was their king, and so kind of meaning he was an empire. This is not just a isolated kingdom. This is broader. And so this King of Kings, Nebuchadnezzar, is sitting down and having a meal with these 4 Jewish kids who aren't all that old. They've been slaves for 3 years, as we read a little bit earlier, and they've not defiled themselves with the king's meat. And here they are, elevated, having a meal privately with Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 20. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. It's interesting to think of the parallels of Joseph and Daniel. Joseph, interpreter of dreams, becomes a slave in a foreign land, interprets the dream of the Pharaoh, the king, and then is elevated as the second in command. And that's a very similar storyline. Daniel is a child of God in the same family as Joseph, and he's taken away into a foreign land. And then he, as we're about to read, interprets a dream and then is elevated in that kingdom. And he's actually elevated, demoted, then elevated again in a different administration. So anyway, just some similarities. Chapter 2. And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. I can imagine, because let's talk about dreams for a second. There's actually a big shift in Eastern and Western mindsets of dreams, especially ancient Eastern and modern Western. If a person in the West here in 2020 has a dream, we don't generally think it means anything. It's if it has any value, it's entertainment value, or possibly it would be thought of as like a subconscious running of your brain. You know, that's how I've always thought of it, is like, it's like the TV being on, but you're not in the room. And so when you're asleep, it's like your brain is moving, but your body's asleep, which lowers inhibition. So maybe your brain would think of reality in different ways. And sometimes you can learn stuff from dreams. And some people wake up from dreams. Inventors or songwriters, they wake up from dreams and they just get a pen out and all of a sudden they've got this thing that they dreamt up. Some pretty famous inventions were made that way. But we generally think of it's chance, it's subconscious movement of the chemicals in your body. Ancient Eastern, they thought of it as a projector. And it's a dream to them was something that informed them of what's more real than what is going on outside of you. So you wake up and you move about your day and you're touching things and that's all reality. But when you dream a dream, they think this is either from God, Jehovah, or some other God. This is a perspective shift from the cosmos, to help them think of the world in more real terms, to help them have more clarity. And so, like, if you had a dream, like Pharaoh did, of 7 cows that are healthy, 7 cows that are unhealthy, and then the 7 unhealthy cows eat the healthy cows, you're not like, man, I should be more careful about what I eat before bed. They would automatically thought, okay, this is extremely important. I need somebody to help me interpret what that was supposed to be about. I just saw something about reality that I don't understand yet, and I need to know. That's why it was given to me in my dream and not somebody else. So they would then passionately pursue an interpretation of their dream. So Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, which we're not told just yet what it is, but it wakes him up in his sleep, and he's totally troubled. In the middle of the night, everybody's phones are ringing in the kingdom. Hey, the king had a dream. Get up, get up, get up. And you've got sorcerers, astrologers, the Chaldeans. But he goes first to his own countrymen, which would make sense, is if you feel that way about dreams, you have this dream and you think this has significance to reality. As a king, this could affect my kingdom. And so you're not going to go to even if you've captured them, you're not going to the Jews first. You're going to try to get the information you need from your own people, because it could have national security implications in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, which it does. Verse 2. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. So you tell us the dream, and we can come up with an interpretation for you, no problem. just tell us the dream, we'll tell you the thing. I just want to go back to bed. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. Oh man. Wake up in the middle of the night, some crazy king is like, I had this really important dream. Okay, tell us about it. I can't remember it. And if you don't come up with the answer, I'm going to cut you in pieces and make your house a dunghill. Wow, that's a really big deal. Verse 6, but if ye show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because ye see the thing is gone from me. You're just trying to buy time, because you don't want to be cut in pieces and your house be made a dunghill. I see through you. They're like, well, yeah. Anyway, verse 9. But if ye will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. Hey, I'm just a magician, man. Come on. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. What a fool, right? They can't tell me this dream that I can't even remember, and I'm going to kill every smart guy in my kingdom. Part of me just wishes like Daniel would have kept quiet. Like, yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead. It's like somebody getting mad and then punching their own wall and knocking a hole in the wall and breaking their hand. Like, all right. I mean, you throwing that little fit only hurt you and your property. So do your thing, man. So King Nebuchadnezzar is more prideful than he is smart, more powerful than he is smart. So he's, you guys think you're so wise? I'm going to kill everybody. I'll show you how wise you are. Might makes right. That's Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 13. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain. And they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Oh, so we're killing even the Jewish guys who didn't even have a chance to interpret the dream. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions, that they would desire mercies of God, of the God of heaven concerning this secret. I think that's really special, by the way. Of course, they're all about to die, so they're definitely concerned about this. And so Daniel requested the king, hey, why don't you hear what I have to say? Before you just go kill everybody, why don't you give me a chance? And it reminds me of the bravery of David with everybody else is like, oh man, I can't take this Goliath. He's like, I mean, Saul, if you let me, I'll go fight him, But then he goes to his buddies, though, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and asks them, hey, can you pray for me, guys? I'm going to go before Nebuchadnezzar tonight, and this could mean our lives. Could you just pray for me? That Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removed the kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, show unto the king. He's reminding him, none of your guys can do this. And he's not doing this to build himself up. You'll see in verse 28. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. He makes it clear. Your pagan smart guys were not smart enough to figure this out. And God is using me to prove to you that there is a God in heaven. And so here's the vision in the dream. Verse 29. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have, more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. So this is the first, and actually we call this a prophecy, which it is a prophecy. Prophecy is often misunderstood as only telling the future. That's, the sum total prophet equals a guy who tells the future. Which actually, no, that's not the primary thing. That was included in what they did. But a prophet was a messenger, a mouthpiece of God in a more deliberate way than a pastor is. So I am, as a pastor, a messenger from the Lord, in the sense of I take his message. He tells me my job is to preach the word. So the word is already here. You can read it just like I can read it. And my job is to preach it, to teach it, to reprove, rebuke, and exhort with it. Basically, this is my thing. I use the Bible, and I proclaim that to others. A prophet was, he would use the Bible, but he was God's mouthpiece, and God would speak directly to him and through him to other people. In this case, actually, Daniel's first prophecy, as far as a very special word from God that was to communicate to the world, was actually past tense. He was telling the king about the dream he had last night. And so just to get the idea of prophecy only being forthtelling, this is actually past tense interpretation of a future thing. So anyway, but his first prophecy is about this image. This great image in verse 31, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. So, image, which is like the thing that happens all throughout the book of Daniel. You've got images. That's kind of like the Babylonian thing. They like an image of a strong looking guy, and so the first image is in the dream, which is interesting because then Nebuchadnezzar sets up an image. So he's fulfilling the prophecy, not on purpose, but anyway, that's a whole different thing. So this image that is in the dream, gold head, brass arms, his breast and his arms, silver, belly is brass, legs iron, feet are like a hybrid, a mixture of iron and clay. So the quality starts really high quality at the top, and it gradually gets worse quality down to the feet. Regardless of the quality, this random rock comes out from nowhere and hits the feet, and the entire image crumbles to the ground, and it breaks into a bunch of little pieces. But then the quality of it, gold, even if it's broken into pieces, doesn't blow away with the wind. It's heavy. All of this stuff then shrivels and becomes like chaff. Maybe think of ashes. And then the wind just kind of, and it's all gone. It literally disappears. And then that's the vision. So Daniel's about to interpret this dream. Verse 36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. I wonder why it's plural. Does he have his buddies with him? He says, we will tell the interpretation. I wonder if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are with him. I don't know. We will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, like I said. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. Okay, very simple. The head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. All right, next. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with the miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. Okay, so all the different sections of this image represent consecutive, starting with the head of gold, consecutive. So this is chronological. So this is like a timeline. This image, if you turned him sideways, because we think left and right, I think that's backwards for you, left and right, right? This image it shows several things, but it's a timeline. Nebuchadnezzar is the gold head. Then there's the next one, which is Persia, and then it goes on down. There's the Roman Empire. So it basically goes by empire. And but he says here, In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. So the kingdom of God is this rock flying out of nowhere, okay? And it's going to tackle them. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. No wiggle room, this will occur, Nebuchadnezzar. You're going down, so is Persia, so is Rome, so is everybody else, and the kingdom of God will prevail. And it's going to, which by the way, let's think about if you are Thomas or Peter or John, and you've got Jesus there and you believe he's the Messiah, he is the Prince, he is the King of Kings, capital K, and he's going to bring the kingdom. He's preaching sermons about what shall I liken the kingdom of God to? Oh, wow. Whoa, everybody. You know, and you can imagine the excitement that these guys have. And you know what they're thinking? They're thinking this big idol that's made of gold, silver, iron, brass, iron mixed with clay. And they're thinking rock out of nowhere. Boom, there goes all of it. And so that's why Peter's got the sword on his side as they go to Jerusalem, and Judas betrays Jesus, and Peter pulls out the sword and cuts off an ear. He thinks this must be the moment. This is the rock flying through, knocking over Rome, knocking over all the kingdoms of this world, and we shall reign forever and ever, right? And the kingdom of Christ did not come in the way that he expected, but you can see how he expected that, right? Because, I mean, that's what we're reading here is it looks like this rock comes through and it pummels everybody else, which it does, literally. It will. Jesus is going to come back and he is going to dominate all the kingdoms of this world. But he didn't do it then in the way that they expected. Anyway. Verse 46, Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldest reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and the chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. All right, so these guys have been promoted, all four of them. Let's keep reading. Chapter 3. Coffee. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold of all things. So, it's pride. I think his pride makes him blind. It blinds him. So like the image in his dream is showing, like Daniel interprets to him, hey, you're going down. Your kingdom is going to die and all the other kingdoms of this world. You're not going to survive it. And he's like, I'm the head of gold. You know, he's so proud of himself. I'm the head of gold. Neglecting the fact that he's not powerful and that God is going to dominate him. But all he can think about is, I'm the head of gold. I'm so special. Heh, all the kingdoms after me, they're not made of gold. Dummy. Nebuchadnezzar. So, because so unoriginal of him, he decides, I'm the head of gold, so I'm going to make an image of gold that looks just like me. And then I'll make everybody worship it. All right. Narcissist. Nebuchadnezzar the narcissist. The king made an image of gold whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together into the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried out, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Then they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They served not thy gods, nor worshipped the golden image which thou hast set up." So, real quick, a lot of times the question has been raised, why wasn't Daniel listed in that list of guys? Why isn't he also thrown into the fiery furnace? Did he bow? Was Daniel unfaithful? And there's reason to believe that he did not bow, mainly because God continues using him throughout the rest of the book, and it never accuses him of doing that. So, hey, he's innocent until proven guilty. Watch it. But two possible explanations. Because of his status, he was so high in the kingdom after interpreting the dream that he would have had important business, and so it was likely that he traveled a lot. So he may have just been out of town. Another explanation could be because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were being accused by particular individuals, and they weren't living in the same quarters that Daniel was living in. And so the people who first blew the whistle, it could be that Daniel also didn't bow, and just that nobody was blowing the whistle on Daniel. Maybe they just knew he's too high up, we're not going to say anything. Or maybe they just didn't see him. He had private living quarters. Maybe he just wasn't noticed. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, there were eyes on those guys, and so they were the ones called into question. So anyway, verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, "Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said unto the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God, capital S. That's pretty awesome. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces. Why do you always have to make these decrees, man? They'll be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Wow. That story just never gets old. It is so good. I love it. It's amazing. So they are promoted. Nebuchadnezzar ends up praising their God and then protecting them, which I've got to go and get ready for church. But the last thing I'll say is it's interesting. A lot of times your gospel fruit, sharing the gospel in this world, will come on the other side of persecution and ridicule. And so standing for the truth and being willing to hazard your comfort, your life even, can end up producing incredible fruit for God. So it's just, it's inspiring to watch these guys and their faith. They were willing to be burned up for God before they would bow before the king and before the idol. So good job, guys. And that inspires me to be more faithful. And that should inspire you to be more faithful as well. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And Lord, thank you for their examples, their faith, their courage. Thank you for using their physical abilities of intellect and smart and using it for your glory, even in Babylon. I pray that we would learn many things from these gentlemen. Lord, that we would learn to stand for what is right and what is true. Lord, to not dip our sails in a way to, through our own power, try to gain favor with the world. But Lord, that we would stand for the truth and let you fight our battles and let that testimony be inspiring and leading to repentance of the world around us, like it did Nebuchadnezzar. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, I'll see you at church. Looking